All right, good morning, everyone. So what do you say? Should we call this meeting to order? Good to go.
Yes, sounds good.
All right, let's go ahead and do that. Good morning, everyone. We are pleased to have you with us. I know coming back from the holidays and the start of the new year, if your new year is like mine has been, Year of the Rabbit, which will start with the Chinese New Year, it is going fast. Everything kind of slowed down to a pace over the holidays, but we are entering. If you read the communication we sent out at the beginning of the year, the word for the year for Chicago Wilderness Alliance is going to be action. And that means that all of the discussion, although for the last several years, we've been positioning with our green vision, but clearly we are ready to roll and to produce and move forward on our green initiative. So again, we're pleased that you're with us today and appreciate all the work that you're doing here. Just in the matter of time, I guess I will leave and we'll call the meeting to the order. And for our elected officers, do we want to go around, or are we good just with everybody putting their name in the chat, or do we want to do introductions? What's everybody's preference?
I say just do the chat.
Just do the chat. Okay. Many of us know, I know when we're in person, we're able just to kind of use that time to connect with everybody. And so we'll go forward. Just put your name in the chat. Appreciate those that are new to the Chicago Wilderness Alliance and joining us for the first time. And for those that have been with us, thank you for your continued leadership and stewardship. So the first order of business we will have is an approval of the agenda for today. If I can have a motion.
So moved, Michelle Carr.
Michelle, thank you so much. A second?
A second, Nathaniel.
Nathaniel, thank you for seconding. Any discussion on the agenda? There being none, all those in favor of approving the agenda for today's meeting, motion by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Okay, the agenda stands approved. Recognition next is of outgoing steering committee members, and we did say goodbye during our October meeting to Jim Jarazal, who was vice chair, as well as Daniel Suarez. And so we have no others to say goodbye and thanks to for today. But moving on, we do have the installation of new officers from the elections. And so this is their first meeting, and we do want to go through our process to welcome them to their new positions, and then also have them review and be installed into their officers roles. So the first individual that we're welcoming here as vice chair, and very excited that Michelle Carr has agreed to step up and to help lead the Alliance. And Michelle, I do have an oath for you. And so as the role of vice chair, it's a very important post. And it's your duty to preside in the absence of the chair and to conduct the duties that you're specifically prescribed in our Alliance bylaws. And you've been with us for quite some time, so you are familiar with our parliamentary procedures. We really don't follow Robert's rules. We do whatever just to keep it all moving. But you will be helping to guide our fellow officers and other directors that are on the steering committee, as well as working towards our goals and objectives for the Alliance. And we want to ensure that our teams are functioning and working together and doing outreach, and at all times be watchful of activities, projects, and programs that will be helpful to everyone here within the Alliance. So are you prepared to take the oath as vice chair?
I have to say that a Girl Scout, on my honor, I will try to serve God and my country and mankind came into my head. But for this, I'll just say I do. Thank you.
You good. Well, again, Michelle, we do solemnly that we know that you will, and it says this little oath that we have created here in the presence of our executive council partners and guests assembled. I, Michelle Carr, do solemnly promise and pledge.
I, Michelle Carr, do solemnly promise and pledge
that I will faithfully discharge the duties
that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of vice chair to the best of my knowledge and ability.
Of vice chair to the best of my knowledge and abilities.
Wonderful. Congratulations, Michelle. We are so glad to have you as part of our leadership team here. I know you will do just phenomenal. And again, thank you. for all that you
Oh,
do.
thank you. And so many have put in so much work before my time. And I honor them and I look forward to the year ahead because I think we've got a lot of good stuff to get done.
Awesome, wonderful. Well, welcome. Our next individual that's stepping up into an officer role is Jim Anderson with Citizens for Conservation. And the officer of the role of Executive Recording Secretary is very important. And they run the meetings and they help conduct with the Alliance's correspondence, retaining our records, and again, giving reports when necessary. So Jim, are you prepared to take the oath of office as a secretary?
Sorry, Jim, you're on chipmunk mode.
Is that better?
Oh my goodness, yes, yes, all good. We enjoyed the chipmunk though. All great. All right, so are you ready for the oath of
Yes.
office for secretary? Okay, in the presence of our executive council partners and guests assembled, I, Jim Anderson,
I, Jim Anderson,
do solemnly promise and pledge
do solemnly swear and pledge
that I will faithfully and honestly discharge the duties
that I will faithfully and honestly discharge the duties
of secretary to the best of my knowledge and ability.
as secretary to the best of my knowledge and abilities.
Congratulations, Jim. We are so glad to have you with us in this important role. So thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, and then we have new steering committee members or those that are moving into the at-large positions, and we have 4. So we'd like to welcome to the steering committee, Mark Bowman, Leslie Dorworth, who is coming back for her 2nd term, Ted Hafner, who's coming to her 1st term, stepping up, and then Nathaniel Pila, who is stepped down from secretary and is now an at-large member. So each of these individuals will be adding to our group to help guide the Alliance here. And if they could just repeat after me, I, your name,
I, Mark.
I,
Bowman,
Nathaniel,
do solemnly promise and pledge
do
solemnly
promise and pledge
promise and pledge
that I will discharge the duties of my office
that I will
that I'll
discharge
discharge
the
the
duties
duties
of
of
my
my
office
office
to the best of my knowledge and ability.
to the best of
to
my
the best of my knowledge and ability.
Congratulations, thank you, and welcome to the steering committee.
Thanks very much.
Okay, all right.
Thanks.
Appreciate having you that. So we went through our formal process here, so thank you. And the next we have is our approval of the consent agenda for this morning. There are several items that are on here, and these were included in your meeting packet. Laura, can you advance that? We have the treasurer's report for the last quarter of fiscal year 2022. We go on a calendar year for our financials. We have the executive council meeting minutes for October 19th. This is when we last were together. Laura, no new members that have that we need to adopt?
Not this quarter, thank you.
Okay, and then we have, which we agreed to bring forward. We worked with Bold Bison last year with our green initiatives. They've done an amazing job, Brandon and team. And so the steering committee is recommending that we renew a 1-year agreement with Bold Bison to continue our work and to assist us into 2023. And those terms were included. So I have a motion on the consent agenda.
So moved, Schultz.
Thank you, Ralph. Is there a second?
Second, Jack.
Jack, thank you so much. Any discussion on any of the items that are being moved forward for approval? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, motion by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Okay, those items on the consent agenda are approved. Thank you so much. All right. Now that we've taken care of all of the business of the past and the necessary work, I want to turn it over to our new Vice Chair, Michelle Carr, who is going to give us a review of our past year. So Michelle, please.
So Elizabeth, I am so sorry, but I did not realize that this was the venue that I would be delivering the year-end review. And despite my solemn pledge just now. I am wholly unprepared for this.
Okay. Well, my apologies of sort with the email. So we can work together here and for all of those, I just want to, and I do appreciate that. You know, last year we had a great year, and I think we can kind of rally around the successes that we had in working with PCI in our communication strategy with our new branding, the Congress, which we're going to hear a little bit this morning of that success, the cafes, the roadmap, and again, just everybody coming together. And so really just looking, there will be an annual report that we're putting out that will kind of capture the highlights of the past year. But anything else that anybody wants, I guess, for just to acknowledge the year that we had previously and things as we go forward to look forward into 2023.
Thanks, Elizabeth, for saving me. I could have said those headlines. And in fact, I'll speak to one of the things that I'm quite excited about. Well, I want to lend my praise as well to Bull Bison as well as PCI. I'm particularly interested in some of the work that the steering committee's committed to, which is taking that PCI body of work, which was quite detailed and substantive, and picking a few things that we might come together as initiatives. And so that is quite exciting. And also just the coalescing around the various initiatives, as well as getting more specificity around action steps. So those excite me.
Absolutely. Anyone else have any highlights that they would like to shout out about?
I actually want to spotlight the Will County Ag Field Day that was done in July of last year. And I think it was a really successful model that we're looking forward to extrapolating across the region with the field trips that we're planning for this year. And they set the bar high, and I'm looking forward to working with the teams to pull those together. And we started that discussion yesterday with the folks from Beaubien Woods and Forest Preserves of Cook County. So looking forward to that.
Anyone else? And the piece that we're going to hear this morning is the work of the roadmap. You know, we finished our work with Cream City. The task force started to shape that, which again is working forward with active involvement and engagement with everyone, and as well as the the hub and getting all those metrics mapped and continuing, and then the outreach with more partners coming to the table, being involved, and geographically, as well as the diversity of members. And that's great to see here, how that's shaping up and more involvement and engagement. So thank you everyone for a great 2022. And so we'll go moving forward here, and we'll do one more review here with our Congress wrap up. And Cherie Fisher did such an exceptional job with her working team, as well as all the staff in Bull Bison to pull off this event. And Cherie had given a report to the steering committee, but we wanted her to highlight that here today. So Cherie, take it away.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and good morning, everyone. So I was, as Elizabeth said, the chair of the planning committee for the 2022 Congress. Laura, can you go ahead on the slides? Thank you. So these are I'm going to take a minute and plug in some headphones, but these are the positive takeaways from Congress. First and foremost, we pulled it off. Which at some points during the year did not seem like it was an obvious outcome. We had over 450 attendees. For most people, the feedback that we got was that it was a very memorable event. We did a pretty good
people and getting more diverse attendees than we've had in the past, including a special push to get early career and younger attendees for this year. Most people stayed at the event the whole day, even though it was a fairly long afternoon. We had dozens of volunteers, especially the day of, and a shout out to the people who helped with all sorts of different things, from planning to execution to cleanup. It's a big lift to pull off all the tasks that have to get done in order to have Congress. And thank you to everyone who did that work. And then thank you to the goal teams as well, who helped with some of the content planning and staffed tables so that people could learn more about the goals for the new strategy for Chicago Wilderness Alliance. We did put out an attendee feedback survey and got 69 responses. About half of the people who filled out the survey had never attended Congress before, so that's great. About 88% of the people who responded said they either liked or loved the event overall. And of the people who responded, about half were mid-career, about a quarter were early career, and just under a quarter were late career. Next slide, please. So we asked which part of the main stage program did you enjoy the most? And what came out on top was the panel on conservation careers and mentoring, followed by the keynote address by Deborah Shore, and then followed by the panel on goal teams. But each of those three main stage events had a pretty sizable proportion of people who really enjoyed that part of the program. Next slide, please. We also asked which part of the program was the most meaningful or relevant for an individual person or for their organization and their work. And again, the panel on conservation careers and mentoring came out on top, this time followed by the panel on goal teams, and then the keynote address by Deborah Shore. Next, please. We asked how much did everyone enjoy the other elements of the day. For the first time, we had MCs that helped transition the program from one set of presentations or one element to the next. 72% of the respondents really liked or loved having the MCs as part of the program. We offered field trip videos for the field trips that are being planned for this coming year at 4 different locations, and we can talk more about those another time, but about 83% liked or loved the field trip videos and the previews that they provided of the upcoming field trips. There was a federal funding preview that was offered by Shalini Valhal. I can't remember how to pronounce her last name, sorry. About 70% of the attendees liked or loved that preview. And that was different from a workshop that Shalini did later in the day that was done live with attendees in a breakout room, and I'll come back to that. The end of the day was an unstructured social hour in the big room at the UIC Forum. About 74% of the respondents liked or loved that. Next, please. We asked overall, was the Congress format conducive to providing networking and mentoring opportunities? Just over a third of the people said definitely, about a third said maybe, and about a quarter said not so much. So something we need to revisit for future Congresses and rethink maybe some of the programming for the day. We also asked overall, did Congress inspire you and or your organization to continue being part of the Chicago Wilderness Alliance? Over half said definitely, about a quarter said maybe, and about 13% said not so much. So again, something to talk about next time we have Congress, and how we can address the parts of the day that were not, that did not resonate with attendees or some attendees. Next, please. So as the chair of the planning committee, I have a lot of feedback and suggestions. Oh, sorry, this is not my thoughts. This is critical feedback and suggestions that people submitted through their surveys. So there's a call for better snacks and drinks, and even putting them out earlier in the afternoon. They were offered about, I think, 90 minutes into the afternoon event, and people wanted them sooner. The panel presentations could have been shorter. That was mentioned by several people. People really missed the opportunity to interact with speakers. There were calls for a Q&A or more opportunities to network or connect with the people on the panels. In addition, the networking opportunities, there was a call for having those spread more throughout the event. So most of the programming for those who weren't there was people watching what was happening on the main stage through a good part of the afternoon. And then at the end, we had an open networking session. And so people would have preferred that there were networking opportunities spread more throughout the afternoon. Also during the social hour at the end, we offered some breakout conversations in separate rooms down the hall. And a couple of people mentioned that having those in a separate space competed too much with the open networking that was going on in the big room. So you had to make a choice between those. And they would have preferred to be able to do both. We did not encourage introductions at the tables where people were sitting. I'm not sure if we just thought that would happen organically or if it, you know, I would say leading into Congress and through much of the planning process, we had no idea how many people were going to show up for this event. So some of the planning was, are we talking about 200 people? Are we talking about 500 people? And yes, we should have encouraged introductions for the people who are sitting together at tables and flag that for next time. And then again, the breakout conversations that happened during the social hour at the end of the day were probably too late in the day, especially for people who had childcare issues or other commitments and needed to leave just as those were getting started. Next, please. Other things, they would have preferred a chance to stand up and move around between sessions. There were breaks, but maybe longer breaks were needed. Would have been helpful maybe to have themed tables in the big room so people, you know, moved into this giant space at UIC and picked a table to sit at to watch most of the program. And it was pretty random. There was nothing in particular set up at the table. So maybe in the future, as we have in the past, we could do, you know, a table for people who are particularly interested in this issue or maybe this part of the strategic planning. Also calls for more breakout sessions, which again, we've had in the past. This Congress was structured very differently from past Congresses that functioned more like a one-day conference event with a bazillion breakout opportunities, a lot of presentations going on simultaneously, and a lot of choices to make about what content you would take in for the day. So again, in the planning for this, we didn't know what the attendance numbers were going to be, and we didn't know where we were going to be with COVID. So a lot of the planning was constrained by those factors. But going back to having more breakout sessions in the future was something that people called out that they missed. We made an effort to match mentors and mentees through the registration process. People who were like on the steering committee or who were goal team leads were automatically made mentors by us planners, and that we put a star on their name badge for the day. And then attendees who wanted to find a mentor had the opportunity to register themselves as potential mentees. And then in the course of the day, we mentioned that a couple of times from, you know, from the microphone, but it needed that whole idea, I think, needed some more work and some more attention. And so going forward, we'll try to improve on that in the future. This is the first time that Congress had attempted to match mentors and mentees during the event. There were also some calls for icebreakers or other ways to meet new people so that it wasn't just networking and connecting with the people that you already know. There were some suggestions for working sessions where instead of just breaking out and going to a presentation where you were there to learn, maybe having sessions where people had specific tasks to tackle or conversations to have or actions to identify or something that would be like working sessions going on during the event. And then finally, we did not require masking. We did follow the CDC guidelines, which were pretty loose at that time because the transmission rate in Cook County was low. And that was uncomfortable for some people and maybe something to revisit again in the future. Next slide, please. We did have the goal teams featured as part of the Congress content, and the goal teams, as I mentioned, staffed tables across the back of the room. And when there were breaks or during the social hour at the end of the day, attendees were encouraged to visit those tables to learn more about what each of the goal teams was working on, what their priorities were, what kinds of recruiting they were doing, what was going on with each team. And there was some specific feedback and suggestions for those goal teams. Again, maybe this is why action is the key word for the Alliance for 2023. There was a call for more information about what the teams are doing and not so much what their priorities are. People who volunteered to actually staff the goal team tables wanted more guidance about what they should talk about in terms of talking points. And I think we'll have, by the time the next Congress rolls around, we'll have had some time to put those talking points in order more so than we did this time. And then a couple of quotes. One person said, you needed to have more basics. What is each goal? What are the powerful stories of how we contribute and receive value? And then be honest when a team isn't active and provide an avenue for people to take leadership to reinvigorate them. So I think there were many calls throughout the day for people to step up and join goal teams, either as just new participants or as leaders. And I think that call always is going out through Chicago Wilderness, and maybe we need to find different ways to emphasize it so that people feel invited to step into leadership positions if they're moved to do so. Next slide, please. We also sent out a survey to the presenters and the panelists, including the MCs. This was completed by 11 people. Overall, they felt that they got a lot of support for their role over the course of the day and in preparation for the day, which is good. And they also requested more networking opportunities and more opportunities to connect with people throughout the day. Next slide, please. So these are my big picture thoughts from the day. I would say one of our early goals was to have the energy of the day be very positive, and I think that was the case. The overall event, in my opinion, could have been better and had more elements to it if there were more people involved in the planning. Again, my personal opinion is that Laura Riley, who is absolutely amazing and did a million things leading up to and Day of Congress to help this event happen, she's being asked to do too much, in my opinion. In the past, we actually hired a company, a contractor called Next Step, I think, Next Level, to help organize the event and do things like registration. And we did not have that this time. So those tasks fell back on the planning committee and on Laura. UIC is the legacy location of the Chicago Wilderness Alliance Congress. It is a beloved venue in many ways. People are familiar with it. It has been the host of Congress for many years. However, even if it wasn't apparent to people who were in the room, it was a disaster. I don't know exactly what's going on with the staffing at UIC, but everything from getting the contract in place to getting the technology in place day of just was like pulling teeth. I think Laura literally signed the contract with UIC something like the week before Congress actually happened, even though negotiations and conversations had been going on for months and months and months. There was just really slow response. The career panel, which was one of the things that we added to Congress this time around, was very successful. So keeping a version of it for future Congresses would be great. And part of the post-Congress conversation that's happened kind of behind the scenes has been about creating an early career professional cafe series so that early career professionals have a space to meet on a regular basis, exchange ideas, talk about what's going on in their worlds, and connect, and maybe identify areas where they could use support or could lend leadership to the Alliance. Next slide, please. So looking ahead to Congress 2024, I would strongly advise no more magical thinking. It felt to me as the chair of the planning committee that there was some magical thinking going on. In 2022, the Congress would just happen because people wanted it to happen. And that, of course, is not how things happen. It would be helpful earlier on in the process to identify some planning milestones. And then if those milestones are not met along the way, then there has to be some consensus about scaling back both the expectations and the content for Congress. And again, we were really hampered in this planning process by COVID, by not knowing if people wanted to come together, you know, live, or if we should just offer it virtually, or if we should offer a hybrid. So hopefully going forward, that will not be so much of a factor. Again, for planning, if we don't have enough people to do the planning, then we need more time. And this time around, it felt like we didn't have enough people at some points, and we also didn't have enough time. A suggestion that was made by Brendan Hayes at Bold Bison is to lean into being an alliance of practitioners. So instead of trying to make the day all things to all everybody who might have anything, any interest at all in Chicago wilderness, just focus on being an alliance of practitioners, talk about what people do. And, you know, strategic planning is fine, but, you know, out in the real world, people are actually practicing conservation, and that's what should be the focus of Congress every time. We also need to be able to say no to things that we don't have volunteers or energy for. That was difficult again this time around because the planning process was stop and start. And the feedback that we got from various, from the surveys and also just from talking to people at Congress is that people do not want over programming. They don't necessarily want to go back to the Congress of old that had 24 breakout sessions that you had to choose from over the course of the day. That's maybe too much content. So curating content for future Congresses so that there are some choices, but not an overwhelming number of choices, I think would probably be a great model to try out next time around. Anything else, Laura? I think that might be the end of my remarks.
Just a big thank you to you, Brandon, Maria, and everyone who worked so hard, and the volunteers. It was a wonderful event to be a part of, and your leadership was amazing.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you to everyone who helped. I always, you know, I'm the face of Congress because I give these presentations, but a lot of people did a lot of work to make it happen. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Cherie. Appreciate that again, and a great recap. I do know, and as much as we talk about of things, there is Wild Things that's coming up, which is a kind of the off year, and we have our own field trips that are planned for the year, and then a conversation if we're looking, I believe we discussed if Congress is going to happen the following year, if we're going to go ahead and do that in 2024, what are we going to be doing, and then when do we start planning? Because we need to start earlier to ensure that it has a success with more involvement of our alliance partners.
So there was one more slide with some additional thoughts for me, but I'll just let you read them. They're pretty self-explanatory. I think I've taken enough time. Thanks.
Thank you, Cherie. Any other information of ideas or those that about Congress that in hearing this that you want to bring forward, or thoughts, other thoughts that maybe were not brought up, or what you, if you don't agree with something, if you kind of agree with the synopsis here?
One really quick thing that I would say, this is Brandon. I want to make sure that we understand the direct parallel between the lack of networking time and the disaster of the venue. We were not able to open the doors. We intended to have a full hour of networking time. That would have been time when folks would be able to find each other, gather at tables, you know, without it being last minute, begin to chat, begin to talk. And that was completely taken away because when we walked into the venue that morning, nothing was set. The tables were not set, the AV was not set, like nothing was ready to go. So I really, really want everyone to hear that, you know, 2 years from now or 18 months from now, when we're talking about the next Congress, I don't want nostalgia for UIC Forum to outweigh like the very legitimate problems. Like a lot of the feedback that we got that people would have loved to have more of this or that was specifically the venue's problem.
Well, that's very interesting, Brandon. And I kudos to all of you because in the moment, you're right, Cherie, the enormous hassles of the venue were not apparent to those of us attending. So that's good work by all of you. But all that said, I don't really can't think of a reason there should be any nostalgia for the Forum. I don't actually think the Forum is a very good venue, even when it works very well, frankly. And that large room is got some real drawbacks for the kind of conversational content that people want and that you all tried to put together. That strikes me every time. So, and then the other thing is too, I mean, if going back a previous slide, Shuri, your comments about, you know, what some pretty pointed stuff, which I really appreciate. Yeah, this one about, you know, what to look for and not for and try to do and not do here. This is very thought provoking. And that for me says, you know, maybe the first thing is to try to find a different venue in addition to all those reasons, but for the simple reason of sort of making a point that that the next Congress is going to be actually different because the venue itself helps make that point. So for all those reasons, sounds like maybe the very first thing to do looking ahead to a next Congress would be to explore what other locations there are. And it, you know, that doesn't have to be downtown in the city. It can be anywhere in the region, right? So ideally, it should ideally be someplace that's reasonably accessible by some sort of transit. But there's a lot of places, I think, that could fit that description. So
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Anybody want to give an update, I guess, at the time that we have, or Brandon, I don't want to go jump on your toes here, but the field trips, is that something we want to kind of highlight, or are you going to cover that under the Green Vision initiatives?
I was just going to say a quick word about it under the Green Vision initiatives. I know that we're assisting, Bolt Bison is assisting with planning, but we're not leading on that. So Laura, I don't know if there's anything from the conversation you had with the folks from Beaubien Woods and Cook County yesterday that would be good to update folks on.
Yes, there's a great planning team that has been assembled, and Lydia Euler is leading that point and working with various partners to create the Beaubien Woods African American Water Heritage Trail experience, and targeting June for that, potentially June 22nd, but we're just confirming the dates at this point. And then the Urban Rivers Wild Mile experience is September 8th. And Phil Nicodemus from Urban Rivers Wild Mile is planning that. And so we would love to get more people involved with that planning as that gets closer. Under development also is the Kane County Ag Field Day, and I don't have a sense of what date that is, but I believe, Daniel, you're on the call. If you have any information about that, please unmute and share that. We're also looking for some partners to help Gary Glowacki and others plan the Lake Plains Partnership field trip. We do not have a date identified for that at this time, and I think that because there's so much going on in that region, it would be great to assemble a planning committee around that. That's where we stand.
Looks like Daniel's placed something in the chat here. No date yet, but they're looking to firm that up in a couple of weeks. Okay, awesome. Yeah, and I think, again, as we look to this, and I appreciate all the comments and the hard work, we had a big lift that we made together, and that magical thinking, of course, you're hoping and coming from where we came, but we were launching a lot of initiatives of getting our focus on the Green Vision initiatives, the whole branding, and this really critical tipping point to really get the word out there that we are moving, we are alive. And I think we just achieved that any myths or rumors that the Alliance was not moving forward and active was put to rest, and everyone left very engaged. And so from those takeaways, we achieved that, but on the shoulders of many volunteers and some that had to carry that. And so I'm just grateful, and we really look forward to all doing what we need to do to help be successful and mix it up and continue the strengths of what Congress is all about. So again, thank you, everyone, and more to come. And And as you go back to your organizations, would love to identify and tap somebody in to kind of help out and be willing to help lead this with us as we go forward. All right, moving forward, we've got Brandon, you're going to talk about and kind of the work plan and what we're looking forward to accomplishing in action with our Green Vision Initiative teams.
Happy to. I thought I was later on the agenda.
Oh, you know
Lori-
what? You are correct. I am so sorry here. And I'm looking at things and you guys are going to think I'm goofy this morning here. We are going to Danny and Raquel on the Jedi roadmap. So my bad, my apologies here. Danny, are you with us and Raquel?
Yes, hi, no worries. I'm not sure if Raquel is on, if she was able to join today, but that's okay. We just have a quick update on the roadmap process and where we're at with the audit. So I'll be speaking a little bit about that and explaining that if you're not familiar with all of the emails our team's been sending out about that. I can answer any questions too and clarify what we're looking to do with that piece. In the next slide. For those who don't know me also, my name is Danny Aboud. My pronouns are they, them, and I am the Director of Community Programs and Partnerships for Brushwood Center up at Ryerson Woods. We're Lake County focused, but also do collaborations in Cook County as well. And so the question we're kind of posing right now is, and that's been guiding a lot of the Jedi work, is really how do we tackle this idea of increasing equitable and inclusive access to nature as an alliance. So as a network of orgs who are all doing separate work and are at different places. And so I've also recently taken position as co-chair of the Initiative 5 group, which is the Increasing Equitable Access to Nature initiative. And so we're trying to integrate the identified roadmap projects into this group as much as possible because of the natural alignment there. So we'll be integrating the roadmap principles with all initiatives over the next year. So thinking on this question, next slide. The stated goals that we have through Initiative 5 are to increase access to natural areas as well as green and blue space of all types that are welcoming to all, to expand nature-based programming across the region, particularly in places with the least area of healthy green space, to directly address the region's legacy of environmental injustice, and hopefully through these efforts expand who has access to the benefits, the health benefits, many health benefits of spending time in nature, with an emphasis on groups who have been historically excluded across our region. So obviously through these stated goals, the focus of this group is very aligned with justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives. And the goals that we've identified through the roadmap process, which I presented on before, but for a quick recap, are focused on engagement, accessibility, and advocacy. So thinking about how we connect folks to resources around justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, the accessibility of Chicago Wilderness programs and our partners programs, as well as the power we have as an alliance to promote the different work that's going on within our network and projects that are aligned with this work and how we can connect different folks in the alliance to those resources. And thanks, Maria, for putting in the chat. There's a link to more of the info about the Green Vision initiatives. Go to the next slide. And so the audit is the first major project coming out of the roadmap committee. It's kind of the first step to a lot of the other outlined strategies we've put together over the last few months, basically just to take stock of where partner organizations and the alliance are at. We can't really take steps forward around, unifying people around resources until we know what those resources look like and to know where everybody's at. Again, this is a kind of process that, this is the kind of work that requires people to be kind of on the same page. So it's really helpful for us to know the different starting points that member organizations have. So the audit is meant to both be a tool for us to help assess, where the Jedi practices of our partners are, but it's also meant to be a helpful tool for our partners to use in assessing the equity, diversity, and inclusion practices of their organization, and hopefully help identify next steps and goals for the coming year for their own organizations as well. Ultimately, we're hoping to better understand what tools, resources, and connections we can provide as an alliance to help uplift and promote this work across the region. Next slide. I probably should have told you on the next slide as I was saying all of that, but again, the goal of this audit is to do this internal inventory and to assess these different components. And it relates again to those 3 goal areas I mentioned that we outlined as part of the roadmap process. If we go back to the last slide really quick. So in terms of engagement, again, we're trying to help assess who in our alliance is already engaging in Jedi work in a meaningful way, and who in our alliance needs to be connected, and how can we help build those bridges and make those connections between those partner organizations. In terms of accessibility, trying to assess what places and organizations are accessible in the CW region, who has different accessible or adaptable programs that we could be promoting and helping people connect to. How can we create a useful hub of Jedi resources tied into the CW hub that helps further this work in our region? And then in terms of advocacy based on the findings from this process, what policies are needed to support and uplift this work across our alliance? How do we better advocate for and amplify leaders in this work? All of these are things we're hoping to kind of be able to assess as we get in results from this audit process. Next slide. And we are looking for assistance in this process. So the audit has been live for the last month or so. We've got about a dozen responses so far as of when I looked last night, but we're still trying to get as many partners as possible to take the audit and to do the survey. So if you are willing to be an audit ambassador and help our team rally folks to participate and help people understand the audit process, please feel free to reach out to me. Happy to connect you to our team and kind of help organize around that. We're also looking to start gathering folks who'd be interested in kind of tackling data and analytics, helping to review the responses from the survey and kind of pull out themes and start making connections. A lot of that can be done remotely. It doesn't require a ton of meetings outside of just sharing your thoughts and findings. And then in terms of advocacy, a team of policy guides would be working closely with Raquel to help kind of create and outline some Jedi policy and advocacy framework based on these audit responses again, and seeing the themes that come forward from partners in our group or in our alliance. But if you're interested in participating more in any of these pieces, feel free to email me. My email's on the screen there and I can put it in the chat as well. But I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that was kind of a lot of stuff and buzzwords kind of quickly. Feel free.
Danny, thank you, and Raquel for your leadership on this initiative. And again, our team, we ended up sending it off to our Jedi group at our organization, and just how different organizations it did come, I think, directly to the agency lead, but however they chose to kind of involve and do that assessment. And just to give everybody a little bit of time, our team was able to pull it, not too challenging to pull it, but had a lot of voices to get in there to make sure everybody was represented. And so that was how we took the approach at our organization. And I don't know how others are looking at that, or hopefully engaging their teams to get some feedback on this, because it will be helpful for us all.
Absolutely. If it's helpful context for folks too, I led my organization as part of our 2023 planning process, and kind of going through the audit together as a pre-work activity to help us frame some of our goals for the year and helping assess where we need to strengthen some of our strategies and programs around different Jedi initiatives. So it was super helpful for us, and just to reflect on where we want to go in the next year. I'm also happy to work with any organizations who'd be interested in having a facilitated session to fill out this audit and talk about Jedi policies. You can again email me. I just dropped my email in the chat, but I'd be happy to do either virtually or over email, talk through what that could look like to somebody else.
Any thoughts from anyone else? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Danny. Again, appreciate it. All right, Brandon, now you for the strategic direction. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And thank you, Danny, for stepping up in a leadership role in the Connecting People to Nature initiative team. I'm really excited to be working with you in that context. I was also really excited and laughed to myself when I saw the super on the nose image chosen for this slide. For those of you who don't know me, I am Brandon Hayes with Bold Bison Communications and Consulting. We were engaged for 6 months in 2022 to work with the goal teams and to wrangle a lot of what happened on stage at Congress. And we're thrilled as a, I guess, officially signed, sealed, stamped, delivered as of this morning with the Executive Council to be engaged for the full year of 23. Again, working directly with the initiative teams. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to take a few minutes today and talk a little bit about how we are shaping that work and sort of what is that plan for the work with the initiative teams in 23. The way that our engagement is structured is a very sort of intensive period between now and the end of May, and then sort of availability throughout the rest of 2023 to be able to lend support. But in this sort of more intensive 5 months at the top of the year, really what we want to do, as you see on the slide, is sort of reshape the way the initiative teams work around a lot of the priorities that were identified both through our conversations working with the team leads and then also with PCI and their great work that sort of weaves it into the overall sort of framework and picture for the Alliance. And so we want to nurture planning and implementation. So again, moving to action. So we've got a lot of great goals. We've got a lot of great priorities. We've focused in on what those priorities are for the initiative team. So now what does that work look like? And a big piece of that is going to be, and I'll talk about it in a moment, is launching in Q1 with a series of cafes that are both connected to Congress, sort of engaging new folks, and moving forward into the work to come. So sort of bridging that. And as you see in that second bullet point, identifying those organizations and individuals that need to be, more connected to the work. And so that takes place on an individual level, sort of in terms of, who at the organizations, who, if they are some of the more junior folks that, was a big focus of Congress, who need to be involved, who are those practitioners or volunteers who want to be more connected, figuring out those on-ramps into the work of the initiative teams for them, but also even taking a step back. So one of the things that we were talking about with the, protecting conservation landscapes is, sort of who needs to kind of be at the table for planning purposes. And one of the things that we realized was that before we do the cafe for that initiative, that we want to get a better sense from all of the land trusts in the region about sort of how they are thinking about their work, their actual sort of core land protection work. And one of the things we're trying to do in February is to convene literally all of the land trust organizations that are working throughout the entire Chicago Wilderness region. Again, separate from Prairie State Conservation Coalition, which focuses just on Illinois, or Gathering Waters with Wisconsin, but really sort of across Chicago Wilderness, whether it's Kettle Moraine Land Trust, whether it's Open Lands or the Land Conservancy of McHenry County, or Shirley Hines, I see you on here, Chris, or Chickiming Open Lands, but get everybody in a room together and talk about sort of what are the priorities, what are the strategies, where are there gaps in what we as the land trusts can do. So it's at those different levels. So it's engaging folks from Congress, bringing them into the work, some of those new folks, so that new energy on that more individual organizational level, but also taking a step back and saying sort of who needs to kind of gather as we think about the entire Chicago region landscape. So, the Conservation Fund, Brooke got back to, or the Conservation Fund, absolutely, and the Conservation Foundation, Emmy, Brooke, all of them, absolutely, will be part of the conversation. That's reacting to a comment in the chat. And so all of this sort of early stuff, kind of seeing where the energy is informing, implementing work plans and timelines. So for instance, if you could go to the next slide. I'm jumping ahead to the 7 showcase and deep dive cafes, because we had the first one yesterday focused on the first initiative team, Healthy Landscapes. And what we did added, it was a special kind of 2-hour edition. And Patty specifically welcomed in new folks. She specifically reached out to the folks who signed up at Congress as being interested in the initiative directly, in addition to the great sort of e-blasts that Maria and Laura sent out. So took that time to reach out to those folks, invite them into the work, shouted or gave them a call out as we began. We did an overview based on the messages and sort of the frameworks and the priorities from those great slides that PCI created. So, it was another opportunity to continue launching the way we're talking about the work, launching the way that we're talking about this framework of what CWA as an alliance is doing, building on those resources that were developed for Congress, and sort of like bringing them to life. So we did an overview of what is the work, what are the priorities, how can you get involved, and what's the work that came before that was foundational for that initiative. And we're going to do that with each of the 7 as we go through. And then we did a deep dive into 2 specific priority areas, the creation of a cooperative weed management area in the Chicago Wilderness region, and then thinking about how prescribed burn trainings and prescribed burn certification and those efforts in the region can coordinate in other parts of the state and sort of get those folks trained or those volunteers trained, and how we can make sure that happens more robustly in this region. It was 2 panel conversations with experts from sort of all over, kind of talking about different models. And then specifically, all the time through yesterday's cafe with, again, new people, longstanding folks, deep dive into these 2 areas. We already have the quarterly meeting, which is happening on Tuesday for that initiative. And so we were able to say, hey, here's an overview of the work. Here's a deep dive with experts into 2 of the priority areas that we actually want to move forward in a very concrete, active way. And if you want to take that deeper dive and be involved in that, then join us on Tuesday for the actual kind of working meeting when we're going to think about, okay, what are the next steps we need to do? How do we need to, engage the folks who have the energy to move something like the cooperative weed management area forward? How do we think about funding? So that's the model that we're taking here in Q1 for engagement, prioritization, and then action. And we're going to do the same thing starting next week with a cafe for the climate initiative team, and then their work meeting is following that too. So it's going to be the same kind of cycle of, hey, here's a big picture, and this one's going to be a little bit more like, hey, here are big picture priorities and where we have movement in this year, and then join us next week if you want to roll up your sleeves, dig in, dive in, and kind of move things forward. And also being very aware of folks who aren't able to come to either of those, who still want to be kept aware. And that was a big priority yesterday. So I'm happy to be able to kind of use that as an example to talk about the way that we're approaching this move from Congress and prioritization into action, and sort of bringing these things in through the cafes. And so all of this will then, as you can see, and I'll use Healthy Landscapes to continue, will help us figure out, okay, the next steps for these areas are this, this, and this. This is where we want to move the work in Q1, in Q2, in Q3. And in the meantime, as that begins to move forward, Patty's going to be thinking about, okay, what are some of the other priorities in Healthy Landscapes that have some energy around them? There's some renewed energy in urban canopy in that initiative. And then how can we engage further in the year and figure out how to layer those in without overwhelming people? So using that Healthy Landscapes model is sort of, I wanted to share how we're thinking about the work. And then in addition to that, working closely on the audit, on the JEDI principles, as you see there, that's super, super important. Collaborating with the hub, that is super important. The hub is going to have at least 1 cafe of its very own, as we think in terms of this model. And then the field trips too, as sort of other ways to engage folks. So a lot of work to do, a lot of things going. We actually have a follow-up meeting on with Cook County for the cooperative weed management idea today at 1. That Patty and I and a few others are going to. So we're moving forward, and that's the shape of the work. Questions, comments, concerns, observations? Tim, I'm not sure, you're on mute. It looks like you're talking. I wasn't sure if you were trying to say something. Oh, I think he's talking to someone else. Anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns?
Hey, Brandon, it's Michelle Carr. I have a question.
Sure.
So how are you organizing folks around the field trips in order to make them happen? And
again, Bold Bison is sort of supporting the field trips and making sure they're connecting in, but we are specifically not the field trip teams. So I think it's a little bit of, I'm not sure, Michelle, if the question's for Laura or for.
I think the question is provoking exactly what the point I wanted to, and I wasn't trying to lead the witness, but I know that, that is a vision that we have, but sort of like Congress, it's going to require sort of folks from the Alliance to envision and come together around those themes. And so I guess I'm just wondering if you have any sort of vision of how those might come together, or if it's better if Laura comments at this time and makes that specific request for help. I do think it's a terrific time to highlight bodies of work, and so to the extent that we can rally around that, I think it's sort of one of the exciting things that brings us together, like the field work in Will County last year.
To answer your question, Michelle, here's a way that it's sort of connecting in terms of sort of moving bigger things forward, which I can speak to, and then Laura, if you want to speak to any of sort of the mechanics. So yesterday, Gary Glowacki, in the conversation around cooperative weed management areas, was talking about sort of the Lake Plain Partnership. And that is going to be one of the field trips this year, and sort of talking about how, even though they are not a CWMA, they are acting as if they are in terms of this sort of bi-state, multi-agency sort of cooperative work. And so that was brought forward in the conversation as a potential model or a way to think about how something like that could look for the region. And then we were sure to highlight also that, hey, and if you want to know more about this specific initiative, this specific, way of work in the region, that there is going to be a field trip, and you will get a chance. So you're hearing about how that model that Gary was representing is feeding into these larger discussions. And then there also will be an opportunity in 2023 to go out sort of on the land in a field trip context and learn more about it directly. So that's a bit of how we're thinking about how these things cross-pollinate each other at the larger sort of vision and initiative level. And then in terms of the mechanics of like who's renting the bus, that's falling to the planning committee.
Yes. And Lydia, like ideally each of the field trips would have a primary chairperson, and Lydia has stepped forward to organize. Lydia Euler from the Forest Preserves of Cook County is chairing or spearheading the Beaubien Woods experience. And there were roughly 12 to 15 folks from various organizations, including Friends of the Forest Preserves, the Field Museum, I'm just looking, Friends of the Chicago River, to discuss the logistics around this, and they will be setting their next planning committee meeting for that. And I can, once we get those set, and Lydia did do a call for various subcommittees to tackle the logistics for that one. Once we get that further set, I can work with Lydia to promote those throughout our system to get more volunteers engaged and involved in that. And I will work with Daniel and Janice Hill from Kane County to do the same for the Growing with Ag field trip. And I would love to connect with Gary just in terms of getting on the calendar what that next date is. And to your point, Michelle, I think we need to start now and get all of these things moving forward, because as we know, 2022 is going to go by very quickly, and we need to do this kind of planning and mapping this out sooner rather than later. And so I will connect with everyone to try to move this forward sooner rather than later.
Yeah, great conversations and Michelle, great context here, because one of the things I do know with PCI and trying to get engagement and involved is understanding how the structure, what do we do, and at least having a little bit that framed. And so Brandon, with the work that you're doing in kind of guiding these showcases and the deeper dives, with the work plan, trying to be transparent with information that's out there, but it's likely going to require a lot of one-on-one connectivity and bringing others along to engage them, versus there may be some shyness, although this is not necessarily a shy group, but others in our organizations, we may need to tap that talent and encourage them and request that they lend a hand.
Any other questions? I've blown past my 5 minutes allotted, so I'll turn it back. Thank you.
You're great. No, thank you so much. And we are running ahead of time with our scheduled agenda today. So again, if there's any other, we have time to go over here. So the next, we're going to have Mark Squared, go ahead and lead our discussion here for the next set.
Oh boy, I'm not sure Mark is here, and but we are. This follows directly from Brandon's conversation. We, as I think you all know, have updated the hub has fresh, as refreshed as it can be right now. It functions really well at the moment as a data repository and accurately reflects where each of the teams are. And the way that it follows from what Brandon was just discussing is we've always had the goal of also using the hub to be a place where we can track the progress towards the completion of our goals by certain times. And we need to be having good conversations as we go here about how to show those metrics, whether that is acquisition of new land or percentage of people close to parks. Though each of the initiatives has something in it that in their goal that has some kind of an indicator that we need to start to focus on. We are thinking that that's probably the main direction that the hub work would be going in the next year or so, is to start to prepare what are the ingredients of a dashboard, so that as a network of practitioners, we can demonstrate what our actions have been accomplishing. So we'll be taking our position in the cafe series at the appropriate time. And I would say that's probably that's the crux of our update at the moment. One thing Brandon pointed out is that we'd like to create a story map for each of the initiatives. There have been some prototype work around that. The ag, we've seen some of the work already for some of the initiatives, but we'd like to get that completed and supporting each of the initiatives as we go. So delighted to have Brandon on board to help facilitate the interactions between the hub and each of the teams. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Mark. All right, Laura.
Okay, I wanted to just give a quick update on our membership renewals started in December, and we are on track. I appreciate everyone who has worked with me and others to complete that. We also, even though we did not have any new members this quarter, we did welcome back some members who had been with us previously and and have come back and re-engaged with us. So we're happy about that. Looking forward, we have some cafes coming up. As Brennan mentioned, the next cafe that is being developed through the goal teams is the Taking Climate Action Cafe, and that will be on January 27th at 12 noon Central Standard Time. And we also are working on bringing a Tree City USA webinar cafe on March 2nd. But I'm happy to work with others to develop future cafes, not specifically around the goals. If you have an idea and you want to develop a cafe, please just reach out and work with me in order to develop that.
Thank you, Laura. So there is a lot going on, and on the Alliance website, Laura and teams is doing a great job of putting information there. So if anybody's looking to engage or know when something's happening, those resources are available. And thank you for mentioning on the partnership dues. I appreciate everybody going forward, and those renewal processes that we have open really and through March is really kind of that date. We also, I just wanted to announce to council members that we received 2 anonymous donations for $5,000 each. So which is wonderful. So that is showing not only the re-engagement of partners that were with us and coming back on, but others that are believing in our work and the track that we're on. So that's awesome. And then at the steering committee level, we have a subgroup working on grants just to do some research. We know that was one of the initiatives with funding that is available coming out of Washington, D.C. And federal, and then what is the role of the Alliance with this funding? And one of the things that we identified was an area that we could educate the practitioners of what's coming, what is the time of announcement and how we're going about that. So that was one of the initiatives. I don't know if I think Ted had to jump off. He is leading that, and Jim, I believe you were sitting on that group. Anybody else, Mark, to highlight on that, kind of what we're trying to do here to help Alliance members?
Sure. I'd like to jump in. I think one of the biggest things that we want to try to do is identify what those funding sources are and try to make connections with maybe the grant administrators, to find out what they're going to be pointedly trying to fund or how the funds are coming. Some of these funds are likely to be going through state agencies. And so how can we work with that process and identify those? And so we're really trying to just lay down how, these things are going to be coming down the channel. And also we want to be able to think about, Laura just put a thing in the chat. We are developing a spreadsheet of funding opportunities, and so we can share that with all the members so they can go look and see, and I encourage everybody here to be very innovative when looking through those funding opportunities, because some of them are kind of hidden. But we really want to try to think about how we can guide our members to those funding opportunities. But we also want to be thinking about, as we know with these dollars, especially the federal dollars, they come and sometimes at the end of the year, the particular agency that's funding or running the grant program tends to maybe have a grant that fell through or have extra money. And so we also think it's a really wise idea to be thinking about looking at our green initiatives and the needs of those initiatives and identifying projects and actually having a bucket of projects that if we had money, we could do this. Now, it doesn't mean that we would do it right now, but if we had a bucket of money and it's one of our priorities, we could quickly act on that so that we're ready for these opportunities. So the last thing that I think I'm hearing a lot from members is they really want maybe Chicago Wilderness or Prairie State Conservation Coalition or someone to actually maybe run a cafe on once we get a bit more information collected about how to apply for grants, what's the strategy, building off of Congress. I think we all heard a new term called intersectorial collaboration. And so, that I think has a lot of merit. And also, a lot of people sitting on that committee also wanted to think about non-traditional opportunities for funding. So that's where we're discussing and we're moving forward. We've got a starting list of grants. And we're looking for any input from anybody that someone might have. We are also trying to identify contacts with the state agencies that we can function with. So, John's stepped up for Illinois. We need to figure out Wisconsin and Indiana and Michigan, and also be thinking about how can we collaborate with the regional planning agencies, CMAP, Sewer PAC, and NERC. So that's kind of where we stand today. And I don't know if anybody else that's on the committee wants to add anything else. Alicia's got her hand up.
Got her hand up, Alicia.
Yeah, so back in August, Ted and I hosted a cafe right after the Inflation Reduction Act passed that reviewed some of the basic funding streams there and order of operations in terms of the rollout process. And I was just speaking with Ted about this the other day. There are a lot of simultaneous efforts across the state and beyond to do the same, identify which funding streams from these new dollars are going to be relevant for the work of the environmental community, but also the work of our partners, and pursuing these right there. So I know that the Illinois Environmental Council has been leading a lot in this effort. For example, the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, which led the passage of the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, has been focusing on leveraging these federal funding sources. I'm a part of both of those coalitions, so I think it's important to think about how do we approach in a cohesive manner, work with these folks who have been already doing this. So Laura, Jim, and Ted, I'm going to send you an email real quick offline there, and I'm just going to pop the cafe link to the August cafe in the chat for folks who may not have seen it.
Thanks, Alicia. That is wonderful. And I think, we don't want to recreate finding what everybody's looking to, what is our place in this whole process and how do we facilitate through our partners. And definitely we don't need to create, we can work collaboratively and ensure we're all speaking the same tune, would be great. So anyone else? Thank you, Jim, for the update. I just want to make sure that everybody was aware of that. We do have our calendar of meetings for the remainder of the year. We do meet quarterly for this. Anyone, as we go into future meetings, if you have thoughts or from your working teams or your organization that you want to present on, just let us know and we can obviously share with the agenda and get information on that. I think it's really important. And our next time to work together is in April. Before we leave, I see she's got her hand up. I just want to get through announcements, organizational partner announcements or individual announcements that you'd like to share. And Sheree, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I wanted to talk for a minute about the Force of Nature Awards. So it's an odd numbered year. So it is again time for the Chicago Wilderness Alliance Dr. George B. Rabb Force of Nature Awards. This will be the fourth round of awards in 2023. They started in 2017. And just as a reminder, the Force of Nature Awards highlight people, organizations, programs, projects that go above and beyond the norm and provide an inspiring example for others. A little bit about the timeline for the awards this year. The pre-work will be done behind the scenes in the spring. We'll be sending out a call for nominations early in the summer. The close of nominations will be around Labor Day, probably after, so that people with summer plans get a chance to come back and get those nominations in at the last minute. We will have nomination review teams work in September, and then the expected award ceremony timing is November or December. And as in the past, that will be combined with the Excellence in Ecological Restoration Awards and also the CWA Member Appreciation Event. So as the chair of the Force of Nature Awards, these will be the asks that you'll be getting from me this year. First, we'll be putting out the call for nominations. And so we hope that you can help amplify that across the region and down to the smallest organizations so that we learn about and get a chance to highlight the work of organizations of all sizes from across the Chicago Wilderness Alliance region. Sometime late this spring and summer, we will be doing a call for nomination reviewers. This is a pretty short-term lift. It means reading through the nominations in a particular category and then meeting a couple of times with the other reviewers for that category and making the award decisions. New this year, we would like to find a co-chair for the Force of Nature Awards Committee. I've been chairing the awards since 2017, and although there are always people that help, including Laura Riley, it would be great to have a co-chair so that we can split the work. For anyone who would consider being a co-chair for these awards, I wanted to just say it's a very, very rewarding program to work on. We have worked out what I think is a very smooth and efficient process to collect nominations and make decisions about the awards. So the lift is not inventing the wheel. It's going through a well-worn process now, what I think is a well-worn process. And anyone who's interested, I'd be happy to talk about the time commitment, which is variable throughout the year. There are some crunch times and some slack times as well. So please reach out to me or Laura Riley or Elizabeth Kessler if you're interested in co-chairing the Force of Nature Awards. And I don't know if Ralph is interested in saying anything about EERP, but if you are, this might be a good time, Ralph. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Cherie. My video is going to catch up here in a second. Following up with what Cherie said, the EERP awards will be coming up as well this year since we are in an odd number year. We're currently reviewing the documents and we'll be releasing that in the next month or so. I do also want to say that two of our members, myself included, and Becky Collings, will be cycling off of the EERP committee this year. And so I will be making a recommendation for a replacement for myself from my organization, and we'll work with that individual through this cycle just to get everybody through the 2023 cycle. We would be looking for another replacement for Becky, and it can come from anyone in the Chicago Wilderness Alliance. So if you are interested in serving on the EERP Commission, please send an email to either myself or Laura, and we can follow up with you and kind of give you some of the background on what that entails. But I will say it is not a huge time commitment. All of the applications are collected by Laura through Chicago Wilderness through our websites, and those are reviewed by the committee or commission. That takes a short amount of time. They're assigned to you. You don't have to review them all. You'll only be reviewing the ones in which you're assigned to. Typically, we've been having between 4 and 8 applications. We have 8 members on the commission, so you can kind of imagine how those might be divided up. You usually get 1 to 3 that are assigned to you. And the biggest part of it is a field visit. So we ask you to spend 3-4 hours out in one of our wonderful natural areas in the Chicago Wilderness here region. And the committee meets probably, well, through Zoom, probably 2 to 3 times, once prior to the field meetings and once after the field meetings, and the individuals who are reviewing those may meet as well. But it's typically less than, I would say, a 20-hour time commitment. So again, if you're interested, please reach out to either myself or Laura if you're interested in serving on that commission.
Ralph, thank you. Thank you so much. And Cherie, both of you for your long-term leadership on those 2 amazing programs and really spotlight all the great work that's going on in the region. And they both are very rewarding programs. So again, thank you. And yeah, we need to keep cultivating new energy to come up and follow in your footsteps. So thank you. Anyone else? Other agency, partner updates, announcements? Anyone? Anyone? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. So I think that brings us to the end here. You get a little bit more time back in your day today, which is okay. Again, we'll see everybody for the next Executive Council meeting, April 19th. Continue to reach out, please. And again, appreciate your leadership in bringing others forward so we can move forward on these action items and green initiatives with great success. We will be having the steering committee, just as a reminder for those who are here, we do have a strategic planning retreat that we are doing on February 23rd. And thank you, Michelle, for hosting at the Nature Conservancy. And then the day before, the initiative leads and the steering committee will meet together just briefly, just to touch base. But there's a lot of activities that are ongoing. And again, I know everybody's time is precious. So thank you. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day. Motion to adjourn.
Thanks. I make the motion. This is Nathaniel.
Thank you. Thank you.
A second?
Second. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Those in
Cheers.
favor? We got